Good evening, and welcome to our TEDx Yeshiva University event. We are so pleased to have you join us. I'm Abigail Lerman, and I have the privilege of serving as your MC for tonight's program. Before we begin hearing from our fabulous lineup of speakers, please give your undivided attention to this short video, which will explain the format for tonight's program. The audio doesn't work. When the Israelites received the Torah from Hashem at Har Sinai, they exclaimed, Na'aseh v'nishma. By intentionally placing the words, we will do, before we will listen, they affirmed the notion that within Judaism, our actions speak louder than our words. It is perhaps for this reason that the Torah provided us with 613 mitzvos to perform, as a way to actively demonstrate our Hakarat HaTov to Hashem. Like the Israelites, as students at the Tzai Sim School of Business, we understand that our actions matter. Our Rebbeim and our professors, consistent in their message, have instilled in us the importance to be a Kiddush Hashem. As we enter the business world and ambitiously pursue excellence within our chosen fields. As committed and observant Orthodox Jews, we know that our personal success relies not only on our ability to create innovative marketing plan, effectively balance a spreadsheet, provide insightful financial guidance to a client, or pick a winning stock. It also requires that we bring a sense of holiness and purpose into each of our interactions, and to live our Jewish values with consistency and intention. So as we began to envision this evening's event, we thought it only fitting to ask our esteemed faculty, alumni, and students to reflect on the idea of how they demonstrate the Jewish values in action. We are confident that our speakers tonight will provide valuable insight into this topic and hopefully inspire you to find new ways to personify your values and to actively live your life as a Kiddush Hashem. Before we begin with tonight's program, however, I would be remiss if I did not express my gratitude to Sapir Mar for initiating the idea behind tonight's program. To my incredible partners, Jonah Chill and Jonah Loskov, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the success of this evening's program. And to our faculty advisors, Dean Strauss and Herschel Hartz from the Office of Student Life, for providing their support, guidance, and assistance. And of course to Max Live for their wonderful videography. To officially start our program, please join me in welcoming President Dr. Rabbi Ari Berman, President of Yeshiva University, to share his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Abby. That was absolutely amazing. I'm so happy to be here with everyone tonight. So thankful to Jonah, and to Abby for organizing this amazing event. Thank them so much, everybody. Unbelievable. And I'm so privileged to stand on this stage with what I know will be amazing presentations from some of the best presenters related to Yeshiva University, students, alumni, faculty. Thank you so much. Really so amazing to be here, and looking forward to hearing each of you. You know, a couple of years ago, I remember after the Tree of Life and attack, the anti-Semitic attack in Pittsburgh, where one of our rabbis, Rabbi Johnny Schippel, told his students that there's a difference between when we study other topics and when we study Torah. When you study math, you don't have to be a triangle, he said. When you study Torah, you have to live like a Ben Torah. It's not enough for us to mourn from afar what happened to the Tree of Life. We need to go. and pay a Shiva call and be present. And so he gathered his students and they drove down to Pittsburgh, hours away. They paid a Shiva call and drove back that same day. I told this story in the mayor's office in Lud. This past summer, around the table, we had about 30, 40 students who were in counterpoint, who were teaching in Lud in classrooms of Jews and Arabs, who just a couple of months previous were engaged in a civil disruption due to the war that was going on in Gaza. And our students were in the schools teaching about civility and how people can get along. And the mayor of Lud asked me, why are students of Yeshiva University here? And I told him this story. Because we know that when you study Torah, it's not enough to study, you have to live a life like a Ben Torah. And I told this story recently in Vienna. To the president of the Jewish community in Vienna, 28 students came with us, over 100 applied to come after only 24 hours hearing of our plans of Operation Torah Chesed. And the president of the Jewish community in Vienna asked me, why are you guys here? And I said, because what we teach at Yeshiva University is we don't just study Torah, you have to live your life of Torah. As a Ben Torah, as a Bas Torah, you have to live your life of Torah. And that's what we teach at Yeshiva University. That we don't just study our values, but we live our values. And that we bring what we do in the classroom out into the world, to Mekadesh Shem Shemayim Barabim, to sanctify God's name in the world. And there is no better time like today for our graduates, for our students, to make a difference and an impact in the world around them. We don't just study Torah, we live Torah. And that's why I was so excited to participate in this great event, because it's exactly what Yeshiva University is about. And I'm so deeply thankful to Abby, to Jonah, to all of the leadership who formed this evening to show and to share what it is that we study and how we live. Thank you so much. I look forward to enjoying the incredible presentation this evening. Thank you.
Please help me welcome our first speaker of the night, Yeshiva College student, Srili Fruchter. As the 100th editor-in-chief of The Commentator, Srili has successfully covered hundreds of stories that directly impact our student body, while always allowing his strong sense of integrity and professionalism to serve as a guide, no matter how controversial the issue. Drawing from his personal experiences, please welcome Srili Fruchter to the stage to present his TED Talk entitled, "To Make Our Work More Meaningful, We Need to Tell a Better Story."
A while back, I saw an Instagram post describing a movie. It said, a boy escapes from a cupboard, and goes to a castle, then uses a stick to fight a bald, pale guy with no nose. Didn't sound so exciting. And then I realized I was talking about Harry Potter. This is obviously hilarious, and I saw the same trend, hashtag explain a film plot badly, used to describe other famous books and movies, which were equally hysterical. But it brought me to think about how the way we describe, understand, and relate to things, how we perceive them, can so strongly affect how we experience them. More than just making a good meme, this idea has the potential to significantly change things in our lives, which brings us to today's talk. My name is Srili Fruchter, and I'm graduating from Yeshiva University this coming May. Ever since I was a senior in high school, I've been obsessed with meaning. It was the focal point of my gap year in Jerusalem before college, and continued to be so afterward. When I first got to campus, I encountered a difficulty. One of college's main goals is planning and preparing students for a career. And as a first-time on-campus student with no major and no direction, I wondered, how can I find find a career or profession where I can make my work meaningful, where it would actually be meaningful. And that was a question my friends were also struggling with. I recall countless hangouts on the couch and meals in the cafeteria where we would talk about our futures, and to be frank, the answers were not very inspiring. I had this one friend, we all had that one friend, and he couldn't even sugarcoat it. Listen, he would tell us, we're gonna get 9 to 5 jobs, sitting behind a desk, maybe in an interesting field involving something cool, probably not, and it's gonna stink. But that's fine, because we'll get paid and find meaning somewhere else in our lives. It wasn't exactly an optimistic forecast. It wasn't exactly an optimistic forecast, I would say. Not at all. But the thing is, and here's the main thing, my friend really wasn't so far off. In a 2021 survey by Pew Research Center, only 17% of Americans said that their career or occupation contributed meaning to their lives. 83% didn't even mention it. For something that holds, or is going to hold, so much of our time, those numbers are really disappointing. Today I'd like to suggest that that does not need to be the case, that we can all find meaning in our work, no matter what we choose to do. So indulge me for a moment. Who here has ever watched Harry Potter by a show of hands? Okay. And who has ever read the books, or some of them? A cultured crowd, that's always good to see. Now, think back to the beginning of this talk, the way I described Harry Potter to you. I'm going to venture to guess that for most, if not all of you, that description didn't match what you previously thought about Harry Potter. And the reason is because the way you tell a story affects how you experience the story. Harry Potter as boy who escapes from cupboard to fight bald pale guy is not the exciting story of a young wizard on a quest to save the wizarding world. So I ask you, what if the way we think about our work is like that first perspective of Harry Potter? What if in every single job, at every desk, at every register, in every courtroom and hospital, there is a wondrous world of excitement, meaning, drama, and purpose waiting to be unlocked? What if our work could be so much more than how we currently think about it? The answer to these questions lies in a concept called narrative identity. Narrative identity is a theory that says we create and form our identities, our sense of self, and how we think about ourselves, by looking at the events of our lives, our upbringing, setbacks, accomplishments, all of it, and threading them into a cohesive narrative. To put it simply, we form our identities from the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. As humans, we love stories. We read crime and mystery novels, watch daring and emotional films, and tell the tales of history. Who doesn't love a good story? We all know what one looks like, how it can inspire us with hope and vision, leaving us with something more when it's over. And we also know what a bad story looks like, how it can leave us feeling kind of sad and empty, itching for something more. The thing is, we are constantly telling ourselves stories about the lives of our friends, the lives of our families, and the lives of ourselves. These stories are how we connect, interpret, and make sense of the various parts of our lives. The goal is to get back in control, to take the pen and sit as the conscious authors of those stories. To sit as the conscious authors of those stories, because we are each the main character, the protagonist of our life. And if we want to change how we experience our lives, then we need to change how we talk about our lives. Narrative identity gives us that power. It gives us the power to find newfound meaning in every part of our lives. So, if we want to make our work meaningful, then we need to tell ourselves a better story about that work. Now, I have some familiarity with storytelling, and I know how powerful a good story can be. For the last 3 years, I've been a journalist for one of YU's independent student newspapers, The Commentator. First as a staff writer, then as a news editor, and now as editor-in-chief. And in that capacity, I've written and edited hundreds of articles. People, events, news, all of it come to my desk, and I, along with my staff, need to find what significance each story has, why it's important, why it matters, what it means. But the article that we eventually publish is rarely the one we initially get. There's a process that needs to be underdone, that we need to do to discover that story. Take, for example, an article we published back in December. YU's registration process was flawed. One student decided to fix that. The article was about how when students register for their courses, they need to use the university system, which isn't perfect, to say the least. The search options, available information, and function are very, very limited. In response, a computer science student, a sophomore named Oz, designed and created a website that gave students way more information with a user-friendly format for them to research their courses before choosing them. On its face, it doesn't sound so exciting. It seems pretty mundane. But this article was one of our most widely read of that issue. Here's why. When we first heard about this article, about this story, the available information was that a student created a website that gave others more guidance in choosing their classes. Definitely piqued our interest. We weren't sold that we found the story. Ultimately, the finished article was about how through ambition and grit, one student did something that really mattered for the students of today and for those of tomorrow. Oz always loved computers, but he almost dropped his first intro to computer science course. And he did. Instead, he persevered, and he accomplished something really important for the student body of today and the student body of tomorrow. This is a story of personal and communal triumph. Now think about how our perspective on this can so significantly change by how we consider it. Boy makes a website that helps, or ambitious student addresses flaw in university system through dedication and creativity. One of these sounds way more interesting than the other, and that's by design. We at The Commentator, through creativity and reframing, gave our readers something more than just a quick read. Because that's what journalism is. It's a professional storytelling business. We look at the facts, we consider the context, and then we tell the story. And we need to look at our lives through the eyes of a journalist, a storyteller, a narrator. When we do that, when we create a story for ourselves and act to write it, we take agency over our lives. And we hold the opportunity to find the meaning that we crave. Because meaning, real meaning, is found in the purpose we give to the parts of our life. And I'm not just saying that anecdotally. In 2015, Personality and Sociology Review published an article on the incremental validity of narrative identity in predicting well-being. In English, it's a paper about how narrative identity can lead us to live a better life. Narrative identity can lead us to live a better life. And that's what the researchers found. What they found was that it all came back to redefining the different parts of your life. About giving purpose to the things that seem insignificant. What was the significance of dropping that college course? How did you feel after completing that summer internship or that project? What did it mean to you to move to that location as opposed to somewhere else? What went wrong? What went right? Why did it matter? What did it mean? The power is in the question just as much as in the answers. So how does this tie back to work? Well, let me give you an example. There's an individual I know who is an aspiring musician, but he hasn't found success yet. He is truly a man of the arts. He loves culture, he loves museums, he loves music, he loves paintings. Truly a high-class individual, I think we'd say. But right now, he's working in the fast food industry, trying to make ends meet as he seeks to build himself as a musician that can live off of that as his career. And every day, he's challenged, personally and professionally. Professionally with colleagues and customers who aren't always easy. Personally, by his own cynicism and his own pessimism. But that's a journey he's undergoing. There's something unfolding here. There's a story, a narrative arc that's there. And I think as I describe this, it almost sounds like it's interesting. Perhaps you'd like to hear more about this. But this person is none other than the Squidward tentacles. And for those of us who are even more cultured than the Harry Potter folk and are familiar with SpongeBob, I don't think this is how we would normally think of Squidward. And the thing is, because Squidward has not yet heard this talk, he doesn't know about narrative identity. Because with narrative identity, Squidward's work does not need to be meaningless and frustrating and upsetting. His work can be meaningful. And that is something that's open to us all. We tend to think of work in two pools. There's meaningful work and non-meaningful work. Meaningful work is usually that in the public sector. It's advocacy, nonprofit work, something devoted to a greater cause that we deem important. Non-meaningful work is everything else. I mean, I suppose you can throw in medical careers into meaningful work too. Great. We have a limited amount of options. For those who are going into the meaningful fields, you have the potential to join the 17% of people who find that their job gives meaning to their life. And for the rest of us, it's not promising. But with narrative identity, we can move past that binary completely. Because narrative identity says that you, no matter what your job is, no matter what your field is, you can make your work meaningful. Something that adds real, important value to your life. And it all comes down to the mindset you have. If you want to think like Squidward, or like my friend, well then that's what your life will be. That's how your work will be in your story. You'll trudge to work every day, 9 to 5, engage in a bunch of meaningless, tedious tasks to collect your paycheck. And this will not earn any chapter in your story. But narrative identity allows us to take it further. And it's about getting creative, about looking beneath the surface to discover what is the real story here. Personally, how are you personally challenged at work? Behaviorally, emotionally, professionally? There's personal purpose to be found in your workplace. How are you contributing to the workplace? Quantitatively, in terms of the actual role that you fill, there's a reason the company made that role, the organization made it. And qualitatively, in the energy that you bring to colleagues and customers and clients. You weren't born the day before hiring. You come to this job with a context, a history, a complexity. There's something special that you bring to that role. And think back to individual things and plug it in. And this is not about lying to yourself, far from it. When journalists try and look for the most whole and compelling truth, we're not lying. We're trying to find the greatest truth out there. The most compelling truth that our readers want and that our readers need. So why can't we do the same for ourselves? Rabbi Shalom Noach Berachowski, known as the son of a Rebbe, told us this idea many years ago. In the Torah it says, "See, I set before you blessing and curse." And I think naturally we all have the same instinct. Where it at? Because I'll take the blessing any day of the week. What he tells us is something profound, and it links to this concept perfectly. We each have a purpose, something unique that we are meant to do, a book we are in the process of writing. My purpose is unlike yours is unlike mine, and so on. You can't do what I can do, and I can't do what you can do. There's something specific, a story you're meant to write. But how do you access the blessing of that story? How do you make that story meaningful? A story you want to be a part of. Well, it comes down to your perspective. Let's take an example. And we can all plug in our own individual examples, and I think you'll see how this fits. Suppose you're working with a client or a colleague on a project. If you view that as if it's meaningless, and it offers nothing of substance to your life, then it's going to feel like a curse, tedious, burdensome, pointless. But if you think about what it offers to your story, what chapter heading will it be in? How are you growing? What are you bringing to the workplace, to society, to yourself, to your family? There's a reason it exists, and there's a reason you are there. If that's the mindset you approach, then it's going to be a blessing. Narrative identity leads us on the path to live a life of meaning, a life of blessing. So if you'll indulge me once more, everyone close your eyes, or don't, I can't tell you what to do. And pick an internship you've had, a job, experience where it may have felt meaningless. And think, what did it give to me? What was I challenged to do there? What was I challenged personally? With my friends? With myself? If I'm writing my book, and this is something the publisher says must be included, where would I put it in? This is how we find a life of meaning. This is how we make our work meaningful. There's a story waiting to be written. It's already in progress. The life of meaning, the blessed life, is available to us all. And I hope we all have the strength and the courage to pursue it. Baruch Hashem, thank you.
Our next speaker, David Siegel, is no stranger to building a cohesive community. David has been able to utilize his extensive experience as a technology and digital media executive to create Meetup, the largest platform for finding and building local community, while also teaching strategic planning and entrepreneurship at Columbia University, hosting a podcast dedicated to the power of community, and publishing a book on the topic of organizational and personal success. It is our pleasure to welcome David Siegel to the stage, who will be sharing his TED Talk entitled, The Value of Community in Business.
You just talked about the importance of community. You just talked about the importance of storytelling. And we just finished the Chag of Pesach, the Chag of storytelling. So I feel like I need to tell Meetup's founding story. Does that sound good? Okay, here we go. Our founder, Scott Heiferman, a great Jew, after 9/11, like so many of us here during that time, was in a state of total shock. He went down to his lobby and he saw all these other people. They were also in a state of complete and total shock. He met someone and he said, "What floor do you live on?" And the person said, "I live on the 5th floor." And he said, "I live on the 5th floor too. How long have you been living there?" 3 years. Never met before. Met another person. Never met before. And he said to himself, it shouldn't take a tragedy to build community. And at that moment, he decided to build what is the largest community platform in the world, which is Meetup. Meetup has 56 million members worldwide in 193 different countries. We're in every country besides North Korea. We are working on that with Dennis Rodman and others. We will see what happens. We have 330,000 different communities on our platform. Everything from Jewish learning to learning Swahili to hiking meetup groups to Jewish outdoor hiking meetup groups. In fact, we just went on a Jewish outdoor group last week. And that is what Meetup is about. It is about community. But we all know that. We all know that because as Orthodox and committed Jews, the concept of davening with a minyan is something that's inherent. It's something we've always believed in. The concept of arivut, the concept of looking for a location to live in with a Eruv so that we can always be part of our rich communities. We all know that's important, but so many people don't. And if you don't believe this David over here, there's another David that hopefully you can believe. And that is someone who knows that, who that is? David Letterman. David Letterman. I tried to find the most rabbinical looking picture of David Letterman. He looks more potentially like Rabbi Burnham, but you know, that's okay. David Letterman was famous for what? Anyone 35 and above? Well, no, you're not 30 yet, you may not know. What was he famous for? He's famous for his top 10 list. So what we are going to do right now is talk about the top 10 lists around the importance and the impact of community when it comes to each of our lives. So here we go. Loneliness. There is a loneliness epidemic in this world. 46% of people, not occasionally, not sometimes, but regularly feel lonely. 46%. And you might think that it's just incredibly hard to believe, but if you look at this number, it just makes me cry. Most of the people in this room are Gen Zers. This was before the pandemic. 62% of Gen Zers regularly feel lonely. It speaks to the importance and criticality of community. At Meetup, one of the things we did when the pandemic started is we said for anyone with a .edu email address who want to become a community organizer, it is free to organize. I have a 21-year-old who's actually at Bar-Ilan University in Israel right now studying. I know how hard it has been for so many of you during this time. So we made it free to become a community leader, shall we say, on Meetup, if that is of interest to anyone here. Number 9. So we didn't do this before. Let's do a drum roll, please. Number 9. Yeah, okay, we'll make that even stronger than that. So that's pretty easy. Number 9 is leadership. Why community is so important. All the Jonas, all 58 Jonas that worked on this together, and all the other people, individuals concerned, I'm probably not remembering everyone's names, leadership opportunities to be able to do this here. So I'll tell you the story of Omar Acosta. Omar Acosta is someone I had the opportunity to meet. He lives in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. He was lonely, he was depressed, he was spending 12 hours a day playing video games. His brother told him about Meetup. He went to his first Meetup event, which is for people new in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He went to a second event, a third event. He then, even though he was a huge introvert, went to a 6th event. The organizer left and said, "Can you take over this group?" 10 years later, there's been 1,000 events. There's been 6 marriages that have come out of this rock climbing group. Wasn't meant for marriage, but you never know. And it's an example where you just can step up and be a leader as part of community, like so many of you are within the YU community. Finding a job. I have had 7 different jobs in my life. I have gotten 7 of 7 from some form of community and relationships that I've been lucky to be a part of. I was at a meetup event, meeting with an organizer, and I said to the organizer, what are you an organizer of? And he said, I'm an organizer of 2 groups, a bowling group and also a career networking group. And he said, I gotta tell you this, David. I got 2 different jobs from my bowling group, and my career networking group ended up meeting like my best friend. And it just speaks to that overall relationship between the personal and professional, and the ways to find jobs are interesting, creative ways as part of the community. Mental health, as we know, is a serious concern. At Meetup, we have many different Meetup communities, and why you thank God there are so many communities to support people in times of need as well. I really hope that even if you don't think you need to take advantage of it, that you do find a way to take advantage of it. And thank you, God, in this generation, there's so much less of a stigma attached to it than there was, for old people like me. It's crazy, but Meetup support groups are up 94% during the pandemic. It kind of speaks to kind of how important it is to be there for each other as part of our collective communities. Going to number 6, let's get a stronger drum roll for number 6, which is learning. So this is a picture of someone who was a homeless vet in Australia. He was a vet in Australia. He didn't have a college education, barely had high school education, and he actually said, I'm going to have community educate me. I can't afford to go to school. He spent all this time going to different tech community meetup groups, learned technology from those groups, ended up getting jobs, and kind of finding that his best learning occurred through community. If you think about your time in seminary, your time in Yeshiva, yes, the rabbis were amazing teachers and leaders, but how much learning did you get from your colleagues and the other students that you were with? When I went to a hotel, that's how I felt in terms of my personal experience. Learning is so important. Growing your business is part of community. You ever heard of Coinbase? Probably the world's largest platform for cryptocurrency. Flatiron School, founded by a YU alum, actually, as well. Coinbase started because the founder, Brian Armstrong, went around from one meetup group to another meetup group in order to figure out how to build a technology related to cryptocurrency. And the Flatiron School basically grew its entire business by going to different meetup groups interested in data science and machine learning. So ways in which you can grow your business, network, sales, etc. That's why community is important. Finding a life partner, community. I think we all know that in the world that we live in today. Making smarter decisions. There's a reason why the halachic process happens through Talmudic debate. It happens through Talmudic debate because when there's disagreement, better decisions get made. Community engenders the opportunity to be around people who are different than you, who have different backgrounds than you, and who can come into a situation with a very different perspective. Community tries nonlinear thinking and increases the likelihood to be able to pivot one's thought that you may have had it beforehand. I'm so obsessed with community and decision making. I actually just wrote a book about it. It's called Decide and Conquer, which you will probably get a pirate free copy somewhere, but hopefully you won't. That's where most of my students go. Last 2 in terms of community is accountability. One of my favorite meetup groups is when I walked into a room and I saw 10 PhD students meeting every single day. One person was studying biology, another chemistry, another history. It didn't matter what they were studying, but they all came together because they needed to hold each other accountable. Being a PhD student, for anyone here that has a PhD, is a very lonely, very difficult process. To be able to have accountability through community, it just helps you to ultimately achieve your goals and to succeed in everything you want to succeed in. And finally, the number one important thing around community is friendships. 25% of people, 25% of people don't even have not one trusted confidant to be able to go to in a time of need. 25% of people. And 49% of people, almost half of people, of Americans, say that they have 3 or fewer close friends. I mean, there's really a travesty in terms of friendship. The number one search term on Meetup, by the way, is finding adult friends. It shouldn't be that you have to go to a bar to be able to find a friend or other ways to find friends. This is our top 10 list. 10 the reasons for how community can impact people. I'll read it all out together. Number 10, loneliness. Number 9, community impacts leadership. Number 8, it helps people to find a job. Number 7, focus on mental health and that's why I always really deeply believe in our Shabbos communities and how much that can do for us. We always say we're a technology that gets people off of technology. Thank God we have that in Shabbos. Most people do not, of course, have that. Number 6, learning. 5, growing your business through community. 4, finding a life partner. 3, making smarter decisions. 2, accountability. And 1, friendship. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be at such an incredible university, such an incredible yeshiva. And I consider myself so fortunate. And within that 17% that's really had talked about, of finding deep meaning in my job. I hope you all find it. Thank you.
While Shoshi Tuckman's LinkedIn profile describes her as a double major in accounting and finance, minoring in economics, her employer, teachers, and peers know her best as someone who is guided by her strong desire to utilize her talents and skills to help others. As someone who consistently strives to make a positive impact on the world around her, Shoshi not only volunteers for several nonprofit organizations, but hopes to create her own organization in the future, designed to meet the needs of others. It is our pleasure to welcome Shoshi Tuckman to the stage for her TED Talk entitled Allowing Your Values to Impact Your Career.
When you think of the common business majors that are out there, a lot of classic jobs will come to mind. If you think of accounting, most likely you're thinking of working at a Big Four accounting firm. Finance majors go on to be investment bankers, working on Wall Street. Marketing students often go on to work in social media companies or in the fashion industry. Entrepreneurship management students often start their own companies. And business analytics students often aim to be data analysts at Fortune 500 companies. And while all of these professions are great, they're usually accompanied by a cutthroat and competitive environment. I was curious. If I were to Google, what is the business world like? What I would get. So I did it for you today. Google told me that the business world is tough and competitive, and everyone knows that to succeed in it, you need a wide array of skills. The business world is built on this foundation of being competitive. It's no longer about doing your best, it's just about doing better than everyone else. There's a professor of marketing in the University of Texas's business school named Raj Raghunathan, and he wrote a book, If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Happy? There was an article written in The Atlantic by Joe Pinsker, where he interviewed the professor, and he discussed his book and his beliefs. Part of his book, he questions why it is that so many accomplished, successful, and rich people are simply just not happy in their lives. And a big reason, he says, that this is the case is that they're constantly comparing themselves to other people. It's that competitive nature. It's not about doing your best, it's just about doing better than other people. Most of the people in this room here are business students. Some of us are ready to embark into the business world, and some of us are just getting comfortable within their business schools. However, I think it's important that we all know all the opportunities that are out there for us. Those classic jobs I mentioned are not the only jobs out there for you. The business world is very vast, and there's something that each and every one of you can find that's going to be meaningful to you. Raj Raghunathan gives 2 pieces of advice to help people live a more happy and meaningful life. The first one is find something that you're good at and do it. It's practically not possible for all of us here to be perfect at everything. It's not going to happen. But if we hone in on those few things that we are good at, then we can do them and do them well, and we can be happier in our lives. When we're being successful and we're doing everything right in our jobs, it will lead us to be happier. And the second piece of advice he gives is do something that you find meaningful. If you're going to a job day in and day out where you find your job meaningful and it gives you, you're passionate about it and it really gives you joy, then overall your life will be a lot happier. So now we can go out into the business world and see that there's really more options where each and every one of us can find something that's meaningful for us. Some people thrive on that cutthroat and competitive environment, but personally, I was looking for something different. I didn't like that mentality of the competitiveness, which is what led me to look into the world of non-for-profit business. For as long as I can remember, when I thought about my career and my future, I knew just one thing. I wanted to make a positive impact on the world, but I was not at all sure how I was going to do this. From a young age, the value of chesed, of kindness, was ingrained in me. Since before my father even graduated high school, he was an emergency medical technician as volunteer for Hatzalah, which is an emergency squad of volunteers, and they go out and help people. Which means that my entire life I've lived in a house where if someone nearby isn't feeling well, then of course my father is running out on a call to go help them. And yeah, it meant we had to sacrifice some time with our dad, but my siblings and I were so happy to do it, to be able to support him going out and helping so many people. When my father met my mother, they realized they shared this value, so they decided they're going to build a home based on it. You know, when they were dating, they actually used to go out every Thursday night. First, they'd go out and deliver food packages for an organization, Tomchei Shabbos, which gives out food packages to those that are struggling financially each week. After that, they'd go off and have their next activity. And all of my friends know that to this day, no matter what, so she's busy on Thursday nights because she's home delivering Tomchei Shabbos with her family. But as I grew up, I wanted to do something, kind of branch out on my own, where I can live that value of chesed, of kindness. Because I saw that in my life there were so many good things, but I wanted to use that to give back to those that might not have as much good. So I got involved with an organization called iShine, which is a part of the bigger organization of High Lifeline. What iShine is it's a program for children whose parents are suffering from terminal illnesses. These children are facing such stressful situations at home with their parents, with doctor's appointments, and just being sick. And it's a night where they can come, be normal children, have fun, get some dinner, and even some help with their homework, and just forget those stresses that they have at home. After high school, I went to Israel for a year to learn, and I got involved with the organization One Family Fund. You know, so often in life we hear about these terrible terror attacks, and we want to help, we just don't really know how we can do that. So One Family Fund actually gives these young students a way to help people. They connect them with these families and enable them to come into their houses and help them out after these tragedies. But when I got to college, it was quite a heavy course load. Personally, I was balancing a double major and a minor in Yeshiva University, which has dual curriculum. But this was something that was important to me. I didn't want this value of chesed, of kindness, to stop here. So I looked for opportunities outside of school to get involved. I started interning for an organization called the Super Soul Party. The Super Soul Party is a Super Bowl party that's thrown for the homeless within our communities. I had the opportunity to help them find venues throughout all the United States, and even attend the party in New York City twice. Brought some friends along with me, and were able to actually see past these people's current situation of homelessness and see them for the amazing human beings that they were. But like I said, I really like the side of math. Since I was young, yeah, I had this desire to impact the world. However, I also really liked math. I was good with math, I was good with numbers. I got to college and I decided to take accounting and finance classes. And I fell in love with the material. But I wanted to kind of find a way to balance these two. Balance this business and math side of it with also impacting others. So I looked for opportunities on campus to get involved. And I actually was able to serve as a teacher's assistant for 5 out of my 8 semesters on campus. I first teamed for business statistics, where I was able to help students with a very challenging course. Most students really struggle with business statistics. And being able to master the skills myself, I was able to help the next class of students so that they can also master the skills. I then went on to TA for business communication, where I didn't only teach the students skills, where I didn't only teach the students facts, like the 4 elements of persuasion, but I was able to teach them skills. So many of these students come into class with a real fear of public speaking, and we're able to help them get over that fear and become confident and successful speakers in the workplace. So this was great. I was balancing my business and my desire to help others, but I didn't want that to end after college. So I actually looked into the accounting industry and found the non-for-profit sector. And I actually secured for myself an internship last summer at an accounting firm that within New York City specializes in non-for-profit clients. And then I was able to get a full-time position there where I'll be returning in July. For me, this value of chesed, kindness, was what was really important to me. And I saw this as a value that I wanted to live. So I went into non-for-profit. But the non-for-profit world is more broad than what we think of as just charitable organizations. There's so many different types of non-for-profits. But what unites all of them is that they have this bigger goal in mind to help either the world or people in some way. And that's what drew me to non-for-profit. However, they often operate very similarly to for-profit organizations, which means they need that same wide array of skilled workers to come to make their companies profitable. So each one of you can possibly get involved in not-for-profit organizations in your own ways. But of course, whenever you think of not-for-profit, you're greeted with the immediate concern: you don't make money in not-for-profit. Just last week, 2 mentors of mine looked at me and said, Shoshi, don't go into non-for-profit. You're not going to make money, just go into for-profit. And it is a real concern. And I think that you need to just take a step back and look at what's important to you. If right now your biggest goal is to make the most money, then yeah, probably don't go into non-for-profit. You won't be happy there. But if you kind of feel a pull to do something more meaningful with your life and have your job to have an actual impact on the world, then maybe it's worth it for you to forgo some of that extra spending money so that you can feel like your life has meaning. The not-for-profit world also appeals to more values than just this chesed, kindness. So many values are manifested in different not-for-profit organizations. For example, if you really value peace, get involved with the different not-for-profit organizations that work to promote peace both on a large global scale or a small local scale. Or if you really value faith and religion, then get involved. You should know that most religious institutions and houses of worship are actually not-for-profit organizations. The world of not-for-profit is so vast and there's so many opportunities for you to get involved. But some of you might be thinking, this sounds great, I'd love to live my values, but I have a job that I'm really excited about. And I'm here to tell you that your values don't have to stop here. There are ways for you to actually bring those values into your own personal jobs, however it is, whatever profession you go into. That means both within the walls of your company and also in your personal life. For example, if you really value the pursuit of knowledge, then within your company, look for opportunities where your company is offering classes on different things within your industry or other industries. Or outside of work, go to the library and read up on things that are important to you and interest you. Or if you really value honesty, make sure that your coworkers within the walls of your office know that honesty is something that's really important to you and you won't compromise on it. It's true, you might sacrifice a little bit in the short run if you're always being honest. But in the long run, I guarantee that you'll be happier with yourself knowing that you stuck true to those values. And outside of work, make sure that your family members and those that are close to you know that honesty is really important to you. And make sure that you're imparting that value onto them as well. But let's say the value of chesed, of kindness, is really something that is important to you, but you just don't want to go into non-for-profit. That's okay too, and there's still a way for you to live that value. There's an article in the New York Times about a businessman named Matt Wage. Matt Wage, everyone believed was going to go and change the world in some way. So everyone was really shocked when he went into finance and worked on Wall Street. However, Matt Wage didn't let his kindness stop there. Matt Wage donates 50 to 60% of his income yearly to different charitable organizations. This is just one man, and yes, his donation was quite big, but each and every one of you can do it in your own way. When you think about Judaism, there's a big value of this chesed, kindness. And when I think of the two ideas together, of kindness and Judaism, 2 ideas come to mind. The first is the idea that we're told in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, that the world stands on 3 pillars. The third one being gemilut chasadim, which means doing acts of kindness. The other idea that comes to mind is olam chesed yibaneh, that the world was actually built with kindness, which means that as humans living in this world, it's built into our DNA to want to go out and help people. So we need to listen to that call. If your colleague at work is struggling, go over and lend a hand. If you see your teammate is overburdened by everything they have to do, then take the opportunity, if you have free time, go over and help them lighten their burden. It's our moral obligation as human beings on this world to help each other and help sustain the world. So as each of you go out and branch into your own business careers, whatever they may be, know that this is not a stop sign. Your values don't need to stop within the walls of your community and within the walls of your colleges. You can take those values into your professions, whatever they may be. Whether that's taking your values and building a career around them, like I'm doing with non-for-profit, or just implementing your values into your day-to-day life within your own careers. I want to leave you with a quote from Elvis Presley. He said, "Values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything that you do." Each and every one of us has our own set of values that makes us unique and makes us who we are. Wherever you are in life, whether it's in your personal life or within your job, make sure that your values are on display constantly. Figure out for yourself what those values are that are important to you and are meaningful to you, and use them to leave your fingerprints everywhere. Thank you.
Who better to talk about the topic of Jewish values in action than Rabbi David Beshevkin, our clinical assistant professor of Jewish values at the SciSim School of Business. In addition to serving as one of our beloved professors, Rabbi Beshevkin also works as the director of education for NCSY, has published several books, and hosts his own podcast. It's our pleasure to welcome Rabbi David Beshevkin to the stage for his TED Talk on how values are never on the signage.
Those of you who may or may not know some of my work and what I do, but I work with a lot of Jewish organizations. And Jews love talking about Jewish values. Blink, called What You Do, and it's a book that is not about values. Dare I say, it's anti-values. And I want to assure everybody in the crowd, I would not be speaking about this tonight had I known in advance that Rabbi Dr. Berman would be here tonight. Not a chance, but he is here. He writes about how values, mission statements, it's not the real story. All of you went to a high school, all of you go to a university that has a mission statement, that has values. And I bet if I took all of those mission statements and all of those values and I mixed them together, it would be hard to sort together which mission statement aligns with which institution. So how do you tell the difference between different institutions? How do you tell the difference between different companies? His thesis is that it's all about culture. Culture, in his words, is not like a mission statement. You can't just set it up and have it last forever. There's a saying in the military that if you see something below standard and do nothing, then you set a new standard. This is also true of culture. If you see something off culture and ignore it, you've created a new culture. Culture is what reinforces your values, and you are creating them constantly. You can write down on a sign what you value, what you hold dear, what mission statements guide your institution, your high school, your company, for-profit, non-profit. And you can put it on a building, you can put it on a billboard, you can write it on a skyscraper. We've done all of the above. But the only way that you really shape and change a unique institution is through the cultural experience of being part of that institution. There are all sorts of different values that we talk about in the Jewish community. We have the 5 Torah. A round of applause for the 5 Torah. We're not applauding enough for the 5 Torah. We're just not doing that together. We have the 13 Ikarim of the Rambam. We have Rambam got no applause. No. We don't need to applause after each one. The 5 Torah, the Yud Gimel Ikarim, the 13 principles of the Rambam. We remember Torah Umada, Torah Misinai, the fact that the Torah that we have derives from God in Revelation, Torah in Derech Eretz, the great movement of Rav Shamshon Fall Hirsch. We have excellence, we have kindness, we've mentioned the honesty today. There's so many values that we hold dear, that we prop up in our own lives and our own institutions. My question is is what is the culture that reinforces your values? What is the culture that reinforces each of these? There's a culture that reinforces the value of revelation and the significance of our Torah. There's a way that we stand up when a Sefer Torah walks out of the Aron Kodesh. There are rules that we have in the way that we don't touch the parchment, the cloth of a Sefer Torah. There is a reverence in which we approach a Sefer Torah. If you don't build culture around your values, then all you have is a sign. And what I would ask each of you in your own life is, what is the culture that reinforces your values? Because without that culture, without that specificity of the ongoing experience of what it's like interacting with a specific institution, a specific person, a specific individual, a specific company, then you're just left with the sign. Ben Horowitz had a conversation with a fabulous podcast host, name, not me, hold your applause, Barry Ritholtz. Barry Ritholtz hosts a podcast called Masters in Business. He's a wonderful, wonderful podcast where he talks with business leaders across the spectrum. And he had this conversation. I want to focus on the bold in that second column. And so that begs the question, how do you get people to behave how you want them to behave when you're not there? When you're not in the room, when there's no sign, when there's no written mantra that has your principles of what you value, what you want to be, what you want to become. How do you get a company and an individual to do that? Like all things, your culture, the second column, is not in the mission statement. They're not in the KPIs and the OKRs and all these kind of things. The culture has to be built for a specific strategy. And what I would ask each of you right now is, imagine we didn't have a sign on that massive Reuben dorm on Amsterdam Avenue. And I want you to ask, what were the cultural values that you saw reinforced during your YU experience? If you had to make a list of 5 values that were reinforced constantly in your experience, what were they? What did you feel was promoted and what did you feel was demoted? What was honored and raised and put on a pedestal and what was deliberately pushed down and not valued? Because the way that you create culture is by promoting, and the way that you create culture is by demoting. What you praise, what you give significance to is what creates the culture, not necessarily what's on the sign. And the most important values are not the ones that are on the side of the building. It's the ones that you can state and recite when there is no sign, when there is no clear guideline. What do people feel like when they interact with you or that institution? There's a difference between values and culture, but they have to work together. Values might ask, what is on the signage? What is written on the mission statement? What is written in the text in the holy books? What is the slogan? But the real questions that reinforce those values all come down to the cultural experience. Experientially, what is it like when you move through this institution? Experientially, what is it like when you interact with this individual? What does it feel like? Who or what gets promoted? Who or what gets demoted? How is the budget allocated? You want to know what a company values? Don't show me their mission statement. Show me what they spend their time and resources on. And I will tell you what they value. What is the experience like? There's a comedian named Pat Regan who's only done a couple sets. And he has this wonderful dialogue where he talks about how he is perceived. He says that he one time went to a therapist's office, and he's a comedian, and the therapist was complimenting him and saying, it's really remarkable that you come into this office to work on your mental health and what you're dealing with, and you take it seriously, and you don't try to make me laugh, you just really come here and open up your heart. And Pat Regan looked at him and he's like, I actually try really freaking hard to make you laugh. That did not help me. Sometimes what we praise and the experience are misaligned. That's when values and culture are misaligned. Very often you meet somebody and their values is, I want to be seen as smart. I want to be seen as kind. I want to be seen as sweet. And you ask people who interact with them, and they're like, they're miserable. They're not clever. They're not intelligent. They didn't make me laugh. There's a misalignment between the cultural experience, what it feels like interacting with them, and what they actually value. And I think for strong institutions and individuals, there needs to be an alignment between the values that are written on the signs in the holy books, on the walls, and what the cultural experience of people moving through those institutions need to be like. There is a famous verse in Proverbs that talks about how we evaluate people. Metzaref lakesef v'chur lazahav v'ish lefi mahalalo. We evaluate silver through the crucible, gold through the furnace, and a person is evaluated by their praise. Now, on a simple level, this means what do they say about them? What's the Yelp reviews? What was why you like? What was the experience like? And that's the cultural reinforcement component. What is it experientially like interacting with this individual? But there is another component, and that is the interpretation of Rabbeinu Yonah, who says that a person is evaluated based on their praise. Does not mean what others say about them, but what they praise, what they highlight, what they value. And I think both of these explanations are correct and highlight the importance of an alignment between what you value, what are on your personal signs, what are on your institutional signs, what are on your organizational signs, and what it actually feels like when people interact with you. And I would ask all of you not just to ask a question about Yeshiva University, but ask it about yourselves. I know what you value. We think about that a lot. But ask yourself for a moment, what is it like, what is the experience like interacting with you, with the people in this room? When people walk away from an interaction with you, does it feel dismissive? Does it feel warm? Does it feel aspirational? Does it feel challenging? Everybody has values, but the way that we preserve and reinforce those values is through the cultural experience. And those are the two ways that we look at how we evaluate an individual and how we evaluate an institution. Ish lefi mahalalo, a person, an individual. It is based on what others say about them, the cultural experience, but also lefi mashu mehalel, what that person praises. And I think in our lives, when we think about Jewish values in action, when we think about how we represent Jewish values, it's not just enough to have signs, to have 5 Torot, to have Yud Gimel Ikarim, to have principles, to have values. We need to make sure that the cultural experience of when people interact with us, when people move through our institution, those values that we hold most dear are reinforced for an uplifting experience.
In addition to serving as a CFO in Silicon Valley, our next speaker has not only taken 3 companies public, started his own software company, and assisted over 20 emerging companies, but has also provided support to several nonprofit organizations and economic development projects throughout the world. Please join me in welcoming Professor Mark Fichtel, who will be presenting his TED Talk entitled Cultural Intelligence and Identity, Being a Proud Jew in the Worldwide Workplace.
I've flown over 3 million miles around the world and done business in 20 different countries. And all that time, I want to knock on my head and try to be a proud Jew. So what I want to talk about tonight is how to be a proud Jew when encountering other cultures or being within other cultures. And also, in a general sense, how anyone with a strong identity can keep that identity while working with people in other cultures to the mutual benefit of the work being done. So I learned the value of being a proud Jew from my father. He grew up at a time in the middle of the 20th century where the highest, or very high, American value was being part of the melting pot, fitting in. And many Jews changed their name, many Jews refrained from doing things that would make them seem obviously Jewish. But my father kept his name, Stanley Finkel, an obvious Jewish name, and he was proud of his Judaism. From the time he was in Harvard Business School, his time as an intelligence officer, and throughout a successful business career. And he always said to me, people respect people who are proud of who they are much more than they respect people who try to be someone who they're not. So I've tried to bring that to the world that I've done business in, and that's led me to davening with Talis and Dillon, Herschel, and phylacteries in the Dubai airport and Frankfurt airport. That's led me to wear a yarmulke in Munich, in Tokyo, in Paris. That's led me to eat kosher in Japan, in Singapore, and in Afghanistan. So I believe throughout that time I've been somewhat successful in my business and been able to do that by keeping that strong identity and by learning from people in other cultures. So first thing I want to talk about is a concept called cultural intelligence. So you've all heard about emotional intelligence, the concept that by regulating your emotions, by tuning into the emotions of other people, you can effectively work with them together on whatever you're working on. And this term is now in common parlance. I know that because in November, the day after Adams was elected mayor, the first thing he said in his news conference was, I'm going to hire people in my administration of emotional intelligence, of high EQ. So, and indeed, throughout American organizations, this is one of the key components, having high EQ that people are looking for to hire and to promote. So cultural intelligence, having a high CQ, is an analogous concept. And it's where universalism meets particularism. Universalism is the concept that by searching for rules and regulations and moral imperatives that can be applied across a society or across a culture, you can get the best results. Particularism searches for what's unique about a society or a culture or an organization and values that uniqueness and that specialness. So how do we reconcile those two concepts? That's cultural intelligence. I'll give a few pointers to help you all try to develop your high CQ, because I believe that characteristic of having high CQ is what organizations will be looking for and what will make you more successful in the world that's become more interconnected and where there's more diversity in the workplace. So first, you need to be proud of who you are. You need to be proud, but not in a sort of condescending way, but in a humble way. And I've had many encounters with other cultures where I could have been offended, I could have been defensive, but the idea is to be like the New York Jets. No offense, no defense. And I've run into this in a number of places, especially in the Far East. I've had encounters, usually late at night. We've worked together a long day, maybe we've gone out and done something socially. And somewhere during that time, a number of patients, someone turned to me and said, what's it like to be a Jew and be able to go to the bank and get the money you need? Or how do Jews get articles in newspapers when they want to get those articles? And it wasn't done in a derisive way. If anything, it was done in a sort of an awe. But it's an opportunity to educate the person who's asking this in a way of humility, and not to be offended and not to be defensive. So I've used it as an opportunity to talk to people about Judaism, about the history of Jews, about anti-Semitism, and to try to bridge the gap by finding some commonalities and say to them that some aspect of anti-Semitism, some anti-Semitism, is based on jealousy. We have been successful beyond our numbers. And to say to the people, working with, some of that is based on values we have that are very similar to values found in Asian countries. Value of education, family value, value of hard work, and to use those opportunities to form some kind of bridge with other people. So going out with pride, going out not defensive or offensive, important, and to try to find opportunities to do that and encounter people outside your comfort zone, because indeed outside your comfort zone is where much growth occurs. We're in New York City, greatest city in the world, the city where I was born. We have multiplicities of ethnic groups, of cultural groups, of people in different countries. Try to find opportunities to work with or spend time with people of other cultures. And be curious about other people, not again in a humble way, and try to interact with them and learn from that and grow your CQ that way. Do research, read widely about other cultures. For the first time I went to Korea to do business, I read about Korean culture. I talked to people who've done business in Korea. This was 20 or so years ago, and one of the things I learned was that because of Korea's Confucian background, there was high respect for the elders. And because of that, in large Korean organizations, that the seniority tends to be lockstep with age. So when I went to Korea and was doing business with some of the large chaebol there, Hyundai, LG, and Gold Star, I was able to navigate those paths better and understand who I was dealing with, how decisions were being made, and be able to negotiate effectively. Thankfully, Korean culture has evolved from there, and there are many other people now in more senior positions in Korea. But that's another thing to realize, that cultures generally are not static, they're generally dynamic, and you need to understand cultures as they evolve. So how do we understand other cultures? How do we, without stereotyping other cultures? I had this conversation a couple of months ago with a group of SIMS MBA students. One of them happened to be black, one of them happened to be Asian. And they were struggling with the concept of how to understand other cultures without stereotyping. Because you can generalize and unfairly other people. So let me suggest one way to approach it, which is when you're working with someone or interacting with someone from another culture, are you seeing them as a part of a whole, or are you seeing them as an individual who happens to have some attributes of the whole? You are all products of our upbringing. We're all products of the surroundings that we're in. But each of us has our own unique qualities that make us unique. So when you're working with other people, yes, many people from a given culture background eat the same food, dress similarly, but there are more differences than similarities. And going the other way, there are more similarities between you and them that you need to tap into. So I'd like to highlight 3 Jewish values of the many, many I could, which have been informative to me and maybe relate some of the experiences I've had at these. And that's B'Tein Ha'olam, professional world, Karel Tov, gratitude, and Kiddush Hashem, bringing honor to God through our actions. So let me start with the first one, B'Tein Ha'olam. God told many things to Abraham, but one of the things he said to him was, here we go. That through you the world will be made whole. And indeed, one of our responsibilities as Jews is to be a light unto nations. None of this has been easy for us. We brought the value of freedom to the world through our slavery. We brought the value of treating the stranger well by being strangers ourselves. We brought the value of having a homeland by being homeless ourselves. So none of this is easy, but we're still made upon by God to be a light of the nations, to repair the world, to take the broken world, that is broken since the Garden of Eden, and play our part in creation by doing what we can to repair it. There's a spiritual level to this as well I just want to touch on. Quote from the Rav, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, in one of his Shura drushes, where he talked about the fact that on our holiest day, on Yom Kippur, leading up to the holiest time of that day, we read from the book of Jonah. And in that book, a Jew, Jonah, is commanded to go out and preach to and try to get to repent the people of Nineveh, the Gentile city, emphasizing at this time in our calendar, this most holy time in our calendar, our responsibilities to the world. And indeed it goes the other way as well, in that at this time where we're thinking about repentance, on the day of repentance, we see that the Gentile people of Nineveh did repent, thus inspiring us to repent on Yom Kippur. So just talk about a few incidents in my life where I tried to live up to this value. I spent time on an Indian reservation in Utah, setting up a program for children. Let me just focus on Afghanistan for a second. So I had an opportunity in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 to do economic development work in Afghanistan. I guess to some people, one of my skills is scaling, and this was an effort to try to scale the economy of Afghanistan quickly on the theory that if people have something to lose, they're less likely to cause trouble. So, long story, won't go into all the details, just highlight a couple of things. First of all, the thought of going to Afghanistan was not an easy decision. There was a war going on over there, and I have a wife, I have 6 children, and it was I struggled mightily with whether I should go and risk my life or not. I thought it would help reassure my father that the government was giving me $1 million life insurance policy for going, but that actually is just the opposite of reassuring her for that. But this value did inform my decision that I did have a responsibility. I did want to go to meetings with other donor countries with a yarmulke on and do my part as a proud Jew to help improve the lives of others. And just to focus on one aspect of it, you don't want to be an Afghan woman who does not have a husband, brother, or father providing for them. You become destitute, you're going to end up begging on the street. So we set up programs for Afghan women to train them how to raise chickens, raise turkeys, do beekeeping, and even to this day, there are thousands of Afghan women who have that ability to make a living, who have that pride in provide for their family because of what we did there. So please, take those opportunities when you can to engage with people outside of the Jewish community and help protect the world. I'm going to talk about a part of token, gratitude. A few years ago, I was talking to a close friend of mine who's a rabbi in Lakewood, New Jersey. He has a child with cerebral palsy. I have a nephew who has Down syndrome. And we were reflecting on just how grateful we were for the institutions that have helped CANS, day programs. We decided to set up a charity to benefit special needs children. How are we going to fund this program? Me being an entrepreneur, trying to think of a commercial product, a commercial model where we can fund this and be self-sustaining. And I came up with the idea of a charity gift card. So it works like a regular gift card, Macy's, Starbucks, but instead of using it to buy clothes at Macy's or coffee at Starbucks, the recipient can take the balance on the card, go to our website, select among 2,500 charities, and donate the money to that charity. So if they designate, but we take a portion for ourselves. So if they designate $100 to Metropolitan Museum or Susan G. Komen breast cancer, we send them $90 to keep $10 to benefit special needs children. And all along while we're running this, we're informed by Jewish values. We now have 2,500 different charities on our website, but each of them have been vetted and run by rabbinical authority to make sure that their values align with Jewish values. And thank God this has been successful way beyond our dreams. In 2021, we sold over $2 million of these cards, not only benefiting special needs, special children's needs organizations, but in a sense elevating some amount of American gift giving to perhaps a lower cause than a necktie or a sweater. Bringing honor to the world and being Kiddush Hashem, I just want to talk personally about this a little bit and just relate that when I wear a yarmulke on my head, I'm always feeling like it's incumbent on me to act in a way consistent with the values that God gave the Jewish people. For some reason, it seems to occur more to me at airports than other places and on airplanes. I think it's because we frequent travelers are very you know the rules, you know what needs to get done. We tend to get a little annoyed with people who are infrequent travelers. So I try to overcome that and let people use the overhead compartments or whatever it is to be considerate to other people. Sometimes this backfires. I was traveling to the West Coast a couple of years ago. I saw there was a husband and wife. They were seated in separate seats. I offered to change seats with them. My husband was very grateful, so I sat uncomfortably for 6 hours. But as I was leaving the plane, the woman comes up to me and whispers in my ear, "Thanks for nothing. The last thing I wanted to do was sit next to my husband for 6 hours." So we tried. So again, as representatives of the Jewish people, as representatives of those who have been given the message by God, try to act in that kind of way, bring honor and glory to God. One thing I wanted to do is talk a little bit about upholding your values in the workplace and as you travel. I get a lot of questions from students, especially seniors, who are going out into the work world about how do you act as a Orthodox Jew in the workplace? How do you deal with Shabbos? How do you deal with kasher? So just a couple of reflections on that. First, kashrut, New York City, not so hard. Other parts of the world, a little harder. A lot easier than it used to be. You can get kosher food in most places. Tuna fish now comes in handy cardboard packets. But in most cultures, serving food, breaking bread, as they say, is a way of showing your hospitality, is a way of showing commonality. So how do you deal with that if you're saying no to that? So just a couple of points on that. One is use as an opportunity to educate what's kashrut about. Maybe go to cooking, maybe you don't go that far, but you can educate them on, maybe not, you can't have or do everything in this world. Maybe there's some things that should be forbidden from one, and maybe for you it's different, but this is what it is for me. Maybe use a little bit pure. I always say, they say, why can't you eat that? And I'll say, it's like kryptonite to me. It weakens my powers, right? But try to find other social activities you can do with people and business after work. Try to find other things you can do with them. And in terms of keeping Shabbos, in my travels, I've always tried to be home for Shabbos, but inevitably 2 or 3 Shabbos a year I've ended up in Singapore, or Paris, or Kansas City. But you can have delightful and unexpected encounters with other people and try to take advantage of that. In terms of working within organizations, how do you work with other people who look at you like you're leaving on Friday afternoon? Try to work hard to show them that you are pulling your weight. Offer to cover for them when they have non-work obligations. This is something that most of my doctor friends end up doing on Christmas. I always try to work on Christmas just because I don't want to double dip. And if you have to stop in the middle of a transaction on a Friday afternoon, get right back on it on Saturday night and show that you're carrying the weight. I do have one non-Jewish friend who I worked with a few years ago, and he always either calls me or sends me an email on the Friday afternoon nearest the summer solstice, and the content is usually something like, I sure the hell hope you're working out, because I know you were taking off in December on Friday afternoon. So try to be fair, work a little more in the summers, and by all means, carry the Jewish value of being open. It's important to do what you say what you do, and don't do anything that you wouldn't want to have written about on the front page in this week. So that's a little tour about being proud, either as a Jew or really any other identity that one holds strongly, learning about other cultures, interacting with other cultures, developing high CQ, being able to work with people who are different from you towards a common goal and being successful in each of them. Thank you.
As Chief of Staff, Strategy and Operations Deputy General Counsel for the Big Ten, Adam Newman is responsible for helping to lead the internal and external operations of an athletic conference, which includes over 10,000 collegiate athletes in 14 major academic institutions across 11 states. Yet despite the prestigious title and the enormity of his responsibilities, Adam has never lost sight of his Jewish values or the appreciation of what it means to be an Orthodox observant Jew. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Adam Newman from the YU graduating class of 2013, who will close out tonight's program with his TED Talk entitled, Don't Do You, and other lessons from inside the world of sports.
(1992) was a tremendous year for American basketball. For those who are not aware, that was the year of the Dream Team. The Dream Team was a collection of the best college, at this point, in 1988 it was collegiate, but by 1992 they had moved on to NBA players, and this was a collection of the best professional basketball players to ever walk the earth. Names like Michael Jordan, John Stockton, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing. Massive basketball personalities. And the city was absolutely excited for this event. And in 1992, the Dream Team did exactly what they set out to do. They dominated. They won Olympic gold. They beat people so hard, the teams that they punished would lean in front of them to take pictures before the game, after the game. Never before seen international competition. But there's a famous incident that takes place during 1992 that sort of goes unnoticed. And it's an amazing story of John Stockton. John Stockton was the team's point guard, the NBA's all-time leader in assists. And he's sitting on a bus that's parked in traffic because in Barcelona, no less a year of the Dream Team, nobody can properly accommodate the influx of people. And John Stockton, he's irritated. He's with his family, he's with his teammates, and he's just had enough. And he decides that he's going to exit the bus into the streets of Barcelona and he's going to walk his way home. And everybody on the Dream Team begins to laugh because they all know what he clearly doesn't, or they think he clearly doesn't. If he walks into the streets of Barcelona, they're thinking, John, we know this bus is not the ideal place for relaxation. This is not the ideal place for comfort right now. But if you walk into the streets of Barcelona, you won't move an inch. Everybody will want an autograph. Everybody will want a hug. What are you thinking? But John Stockton knew a little bit better than everybody else on the Dream Team. Because John Stockton didn't look like anybody else on the Dream Team. John Stockton was a shade below 6'1", Caucasian descent, and John Stockton enters into the streets of Barcelona and nobody has any idea who John Stockton is. And John Stockton begins to have fun. He picks up this massive camcorder, because back in the day we didn't have Max Live, like doing an incredible job like they are, and he took his camcorder and he hoisted it on his shoulder and he began to target Americans and he asked them all the same question. He said, "What brings you to Barcelona? What are you doing here?" And everybody looked at him, they rolled their eyes. "What are you thinking? We're here to see the dream team. Everybody on this planet is here to see the dream team. Doesn't even matter where you're from, we're here to see the dream team." And John Stockton looks at him and he says, "I'm also here to see the dream team, I guess, so good to meet you." And walks right by passerbys. Nobody has any idea who he is until the climax of this scene. John Stockton walks up to an individual. She is literally wearing a t-shirt with every single member of the dream team on her shirt. To be clear, his face is on her torso. John Stockton's son points at the t-shirt. He says to the lady, "That's my dad on your shirt." And John Stockton goes, "Too bad he's not here." And no idea, this lady has no idea that she is touching greatness. Everything she saved, everything she planned to meet the dream team, to meet the leader of the dream team. And she misses the opportunity. My principle number 1, make sure you can recognize success in all of its disguises. There's the lovely David Robinson, as you can see, looks nothing like John Stockton. Often in life, we have such a narrow view of what we're looking for. We've heard tonight a lot about accounting. First choice is Big Four. What about the 6th accounting firm? Is it not good enough for us? Maybe it's better. Maybe its values, maybe its culture is better. Maybe that's exactly where we should be looking. That's what's important. That's principle number 1. My second principle is a phrase known as ride or die, which colloquially means, who's on your team? Who's in your camp? Who cares about you? Or more importantly, if it's 2 in the morning and you're having a panic attack, who are you calling? We spoke earlier about people don't have a lot of friends. You need them. You can't do anything successful alone. So you got to find these people. It reminds me of Coach Jim Valvano, the coach of NC State Wolfpack. Jim Valvano held many positions. You don't just become the head coach. You got to be an assistant. I mean, unless you're Steve Nash, you somehow skip the line. I don't want to get into that right now for all those who are paying attention to the Nets. Jim Valvano had a slogan. It was a very obvious slogan. He said, "I'm going to win a national championship." We all watched the national championship. South Carolina won from the women's, Kansas won from the men's. Neither of those teams are from the Big Ten Conference. I can't control everything. But the bottom line being, he wanted to win a national championship. And one time he's home, and he had communicated this to his father, he communicated this to his friends. And he's talking to his father, and he finds himself in his father's bedroom, and he sees a suitcase in the corner of the bedroom. And it's packed to the brim. It's substantial. This isn't just a suitcase. He knew this was like you're going somewhere. He said, "Dad, where are you going here? Are you going on vacation? You taking Mom somewhere? What's happening? Where are you traveling to? Work, perhaps?" He says, "No, my bags are packed for you. That suitcase, when you win the national championship, when you cut down the net ceremonially, when you win the national championship, my bags are packed for you." And it became a mantra for Jim Valvano. He said the greatest gift his father ever gave him is that he believed in him. He actually believed in him. When I met Coach P.J. Fleck, the head coach of the Minnesota Golden Gophers football team for the first time a couple years ago, right before COVID, he taught me about family. F-A-M-I-L-Y. Forget about me. I love you. I promise you, people in sports are so much better at acronyms than pretty much anyone else in the whole world. It's unbelievable. And they pasted it all over the Minnesota facility. Family, forget about me, I love you. That's what it's all about. That's what ride or die means. That's why his father was there for him when he cut down the nets. And the best way to be ride or die, to find a crew of ride or die, is to model it. You need to go out there and be the person who will pick up the phone at 2 a.m. You walk into Barnes & Noble's, there's an entire section on self-help. How to become a cook in 30 minutes. It's really important. I can't cook. I need the book. There's no question. Where is the section for helping others? Where is the entire section of how I'm going to help other people? How I'm going to be a ride or die for someone else? That's principle number 2. Principle number 3, the name of my speech, that's me in Indianapolis, right before one of the Big Ten championship games in the COVID season. There's this great expression, everybody talks about it. You do you. Wow. You do you. You do you. You do your thing. I don't want to step on your toes. I want to walk on eggshells. I want to tippy-toe around you. You do you. Wrong. The answer is not to always do you. Because the shortcoming of doing you is that now you don't really have any growth potential. Because you're just saying that because you are a certain way, that's the way everybody needs to deal with you. I think about myself. I was born a sensitive soul, my mother's son. And I could really ask the entire room that after I finish speaking, please wait until you are 9 miles away from me or my wife who's here tonight, and literally start talking smack, gossip about how awful this speech was. Or I can say, Adam, don't do you, pause, get better at receiving feedback, understand that you're not always right, not everybody's going to enjoy everything you have to say, and move forward in that way. So many moments, so many pivotal moments in our life are about not doing you. Look no further than Queen Esther. Umi yodea im lies kazos higat lamachus. You think Esther wanted to go be with Ahasuerus? You think that was her first choice? She could have easily said, whoa, I'm going to do me. That's my job. I'll do me. But no, she transcended herself. She decided to not just do her. She stepped out and she saved the Jewish people. Go right back to Pesach. Moshe was timid. Some say Moshe had a list. You think Moshe wanted to go to Paro and say, let my people go? I don't think so. In fact, I think it specifically says he didn't. He had reservations to do so. It wasn't within his personality to do so. But he transcended that piece of himself. He could have said, I'm going to do me. I'm not the right person for this job. Find somebody else. But he didn't. He moved forward. And he also helped save Jewish people. My fourth and final principle for tonight: who you are anywhere is who you are everywhere. The lovely and unretired Tom Brady and his beautiful Mason Blue for the University of Michigan, now playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for another ungodly season. Wow, power to him. Much success to him and his kids and his family. We have this notion in life, and I find it with myself all the time, where we compartmentalize who we are. We don't bring our best self everywhere, let's be honest. You meet with the president. Suddenly you're all prim and proper, everything's great. Maybe on the street you're using foul language. You're very kind to your siblings, but maybe to a friend you act like a jerk. It's very hard to be consistent. It's very hard to bring your best self everywhere you go. But the number one thing that I learn about athletes, the number one thing, you take nothing away other than what I've learned from athletes, and you've missed all the Jewish values, but you've at least had a good time, I hope. They are so unbelievably consistent at what they are doing all the time. The Patriot way was do your job. That's it. Do your job. Tom Brady did his job. He did the same exercises, the same pieces of latitude with his arms so that it's still functioning for years and years and years. And he kept doing it. When I met Ed Reed, the Hall of Famer, pride for me from Baltimore Ravens safety. I love that. Thank you, whoever that was. I'll really never forget this. I was talking to Ed Reed once, and he told me that after a full football game, full pads, tackling, hitting, exhausted, ice baths, he would ask the Baltimore Ravens facility to turn off the lights. He wanted to mimic, he wanted to embrace the feeling of playing football for no money, with no fans, when nobody was looking, which is exactly what David Beshefkin was just speaking about. Rabbi Beshefkin, sorry. What is that culture that you're promoting when no one's around? That's exactly what Ed Reed was doing. When I was at the Sugar Bowl 2 years ago, Clemson, The Ohio State University, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, big upset win for The Ohio State University. The first person in the building, and I know this because I was the third, was Justin Fields, doing routine drills that anybody would have thought, of course he does that to this. What's he doing there? Why is he practicing so hard? Because that's the only way to achieve success. Who he was anywhere is who he is everywhere. He wanted to do that. There's a famous story of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, a prize talmid of the Chafetz Chaim. And he went to visit the Chafetz Chaim. And all of his talmidim were clamoring on his return to find out, what did you learn about the Chafetz Chaim? What did you learn from this great, from this gadol? And he said in Hebrew, he said, Uvehei chalo kulo omer kavod. Translated into English as, in his innermost sanctum, everybody praises his glory. Now this verse is clearly talking about the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, the Kodesh HaKodashim, the holiest of holies, and the idea being that the deeper you got into the Beis HaMikdash, the deeper into the temple, the more you had a relationship with God, the better it got. The stronger the relationship got. And that's what he was saying about the Chafetz Chaim. The more that I got to know him, when I ate with him, he was even cooler. When he spoke Torah to me, he was even more insightful. Every single thing about the Chafetz Chaim, the more I got to know him, it was better. How untrue is this of most people we know? You think about a politician, the suave hair, the slick back hair, the watch. They're so cool, they're great, they're terrific. You meet them for a week, 2 weeks, and suddenly there are scratches, there are bruises. You start seeing a slightly different person. Maybe the ethics aren't exactly where it was, but the opposite, I am telling you, the opposite was true with the Tom Bradys of the world. The opposite was true with Ed Reed. The opposite was true with the Chafetz Chaim. The opposite was true with Justin Fields. And the opposite is so true with my boss, the commissioner of the Big Ten Conference, Kevin Warren. I like to call him 11 p.m., 11 a.m. And the reason that I call him both those is because he's the same person at 11 p.m. that he is at 11 a.m. And yes, you have to develop certain skills that you are a little bit different at different times. No question, I'll give it to you. But the fact that at 11 a.m. he's asking me about the student health of all of our student athletes, and at 11 p.m. he's asking me the same questions, and the same agenda is there. Who you are anywhere is who you are everywhere. Bring your best self everywhere you go. And through these 4 principles, I've had the opportunity to really thrive and succeed at the Big Ten Conference. At a $1 billion nonprofit organization whose influence is astronomical, to touch the lives of 120,000 screaming football fans, 10,000 student athletes across 14 institutions, 11 states. The opportunity to feel March Madness all the time. That's the opportunity that I've been afforded through these principles that I've discussed today, through these 4 principles. And I'll end with one closing story, because this closing story is the underpinning to the principles. Because it's not enough to know the principles. It's not enough to show up at a TED Talk and listen to people speak. It's not enough to just go home and tell a friend about it. You have to really earn it. You have to work for things. You have to really put every fiber of yourself into the things that you're passionate about. There's a famous movie, and if you do nothing tonight other than cancel all your homework and miss everything you're doing, you should watch it. It's called Catch Me If You Can. It's an amazing movie. It tells the tale of Frank Abagnale, a legendary con artist. He's a check forger. He pretends to be a doctor. He pretends to be a lawyer. He does it all. And Carl Hanratty, the chief of police, is unable to track him down. But towards the end of the movie, I don't want to ruin it, he's able to finally track him down. And not only can he track him down, he can identify all of his schemes. Oh, I know how you became a doctor. You forged that certificate from Harvard. I know how you became a pilot. You befriended that person who taught you how to kind of fly a plane, and now you're there. He figured out all of his schemes. But there was one scheme he couldn't figure out. He said, how did you pass the bar in Louisiana? And for those who don't know, are pre-law students, you finish 3 years of law school, and that summer you study for the bar, typically in the state that you wish to practice. And once you study and pass the bar, you're then admitted to practice in that state. And he said, how did you pass the bar in Louisiana? Did you have a friend take it for you? Did you bribe the moderator? What did you do? How did you get it done? And Frank looks directly at Carl Hanratty and he says, I studied. I actually just studied. It was the one and only legitimate thing of all the scam that he had done, because even the man who was a con artist of con artists understood that hard work was a prerequisite to any type of success. Thank you so much for hearing me tonight, and I appreciate your time.
On behalf of our TEDx Yeshiva University team, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our incredible speakers for sharing their personal interpretations of what it means to live our Jewish values. We hope that you were inspired by their stories, insights, and wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And just some last notes, the bus to Wilf will be leaving in 5 minutes. Thank you.